Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Number 2, and my name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. Welcome back to the program. We have Senator Scott Flippo from District 17. Senator Flippo, welcome back, sir.
Paul, thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you today.
Yes, sir. I love these segments. We haven't done them in a little while, but we always.
Well, you've been kind of busy.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You got a newborn. Here now, and so a first-time dad. So I understand where your plate's been a little bit full lately.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But we always get to talk about bigger picture stuff and bigger picture conservative stuff. And so I thought today maybe we could just talk about when the government likes to pass laws in the name of protecting us from ourselves. Are you familiar with laws like these?
Oh, gosh, Paul, are you trying to get me on my soapbox?
Yes.
Yeah, I am vaguely familiar with some laws to that nature. And, one of the first ones that comes to mind is Arkansas' seatbelt law. I think about six, maybe 8 years ago, the legislature had passed a law, making, not wearing your seatbelt a primary infraction, meaning the police could pull you over for nothing else than just not wearing your seatbelt and give you a ticket. And they did that because there was millions of dollars available in federal funding for law enforcement, but it was predicated off of, states having a primary seatbelt law in the books. So I don't think that General Assembly, that legislature, passed that law without all those millions of dollars of federal money, being available.
Wow.
And, so myself and Senator Terry Rice had, worked on a bill this year that would have lowered the fine. It would have brought the fine back down to $25, which is what that legislation capped the fine at. Well, since then, counties and municipals and the Municipal League and others have, got something through the legislature that allowed them to assess additional costs at the local level, and that they could keep that money. I first of all, I have a fundamental problem with government, really getting in the business of trying to protect me from myself. So it's a good idea to wear your seatbelt because inherently it might save your life. And that's just a common sense good idea. But now government is also making money off of, ticketing me for not wearing my seatbelt. And the concern that I have there is that above, convenience, money, or security and safety, above all that, I value my freedoms and my liberties. And I think this is a pathway in which government starts to, really intrude upon an individual's freedoms and liberties. And that's very concerning to me. And I think, for a lot of Arkansans, unfortunately, we're not able to get that bill out of the House Judiciary Committee this year. We got it passed in the Senate and couldn't get out of the Judiciary Committee in the House.
You think that's probably because of money? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're stripping the liberty of people for money.
That is what it is, Paul, and that is exactly the reason that we couldn't get it out of committee. Was because counties and municipalities were going to lose money and revenues if we lowered that fine back down to the $25, which is what that initial legislation called for. But now one General Assembly is not beholden to the promises or the commitments of the previous one, so they can go through and change laws and do things. And as you and I well know, government is constantly moving the line of the sand.
Yeah.
Get what you can today, and then come back tomorrow and get and take the rest of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to. I want to talk about the idea of getting what you can, and coming back. Coming back and getting the rest of it. I think one of those examples would be if we look at the texting while driving laws. Of course, that law went into effect a couple weeks ago, where now for a primary offense, I think the fine is first offense $250. But interestingly enough, Senator Flippo, in that bill, if you're using your GPS app on your phone, then that is exempt. And I think that's an example. Maybe you would agree Well, why is GPS exempt? Well, that would make everybody furious if you could no longer use your GPS while you're driving. Wouldn't you agree?
Sure. Absolutely, I would agree. I think that would have probably created a fair degree of backlash, and that let's not let that get in the way of quote unquote progress. So obviously, distracted driving is an issue, and it doesn't just put your life at risk. It puts any other motorist on the road, their life is at risk as well. But how do you derive at what that sweet spot is with regards to the amount of a fine? To be, what's that sweet spot that's going to prevent people from doing something? What is that fine, that dollar amount? And how do you derive at that dollar amount? And, one of the things when that bill was going through the legislature this year that I looked into was I wanted to know how many tickets had been written, the past year, were ticketing people for, distracted driving. And I want to say, and don't hold my feet to the fire, that it was around 300 and change. And I think out of those 300 and some odd individuals or tickets that were written, just over 100 actually got tickets. And I think the rest were citations or warnings. And so, maybe more widespread enforcement of the previous law and not raising the fines might have served the means there.
Possibly.
I don't think that you could really tell because there wasn't enough, I don't think that there was enough enforcement on the previous law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe
instead of creating new laws, you enforce the ones that are already on the books.
That's a good point, but
the point I would make.
Maybe the local people will, now that it's $250, maybe now the local officers will actually step in. Who knows? But I love that question. What you're trying to say is, how do you decide on what that dollar amount is for whatever the offense is? That's a really good question, I mean, and if it wasn't about collecting revenue from us by stripping us of our liberties with seatbelt, but I know with cell phones, they're trying, you could hurt somebody else, but I want to talk about that in a minute because the law can actually make it worse. But why not set the fine at like $10,000? I don't think anybody would text if they were. I don't think anybody would risk it, or less people would risk texting while driving if you got fined $10,000.
Or an automatic, 1-year suspension of your driver's license.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They don't do that, right?
So, a $10,000 fine, or if you really want to curb it, and you're looking to kind of fast track it and get there as and have a significant reduction as possible, as quickly as possible, drop the hammer. Now, why doesn't that happen? Because the backlash would be so significant politically. That I don't think that the majority of Arkansans, would be okay with that.
Yeah, I don't think they would either.
And they would express those frustrations when they go to vote. And so government, they're wise to that. So what they do is, they chip away at it. We haven't gotten where we are today as a state or as a country overnight. So for conservatives, which I think probably a good deal of your listening audience would identify as, we look at all these vast overreaches of government, the trillions of dollars of debt, and all these other things that government is involved in that they shouldn't really be involved in. That didn't happen overnight. It got there, they just chipped away piece by piece by piece, take what you can get while you can get it, and then wait a few years and come back and get a little bit more and a little bit more. And over the course of years and decades, that really starts to add up. And look at where we are today.
Yeah. And, a lot of times we're talking with Senator Scott Flippo. To me, a lot of the time, the government, they pass these laws and they do this gradually and they do it like you said, under the guise of trying to save us from ourselves. But they would even disagree with that characterization, some of them, and they would just put on their compassion hat. No, we care, and we're trying to do the right thing, and we're trying to do the safe thing. But when it comes down to the point we just brought up about the revenue, they want to ignore the fact that this actually is self-serving, that this actually is self-promoting. Self, in this case, being the government's interest. They have an interest in making extra money off of us.
And so, government, in that capacity, is really no different than any of the numerous vendors that are trying to do business and get contracts with the state. So let's take, for example, we can look at our Medicaid program. And, majority of those dollars flow through the private sector, be it, hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living, therapy providers, in-home care services. A vast majority of that funding, kind of goes to the private sector. Well, obviously, the business owners are looking at their bottom line. That's why they're in business, and that's not, I don't fault them for that. So, when they're kind of, looking at policy or they're trying to protect their interests, and they're not trying to reduce their revenues. They're trying to increase their revenues. That's their job. And so, you always kind of got to, really do your due diligence to make sure you're getting as much of the story as possible and not just getting, cherry picked. And government's the same way as, they'll kind of cherry pick the information. It's the messaging part of the political process as far as, what you want the masses to believe is one thing. Mm-hmm. What's really steering it is oftentimes quite another thing. And so it's the sales point, and I guess that's kind of the politics of it.
Yeah.
And, as a conservative and a Republican, I feel that the first thing that we really got to get to is honesty and transparency in government. And a lot of people that I talk to here in my district, 17 in North Central Arkansas, they're pretty suspicious when government starts telling them things and concerning that, are they getting the whole picture from government or from the media? There's this kind of underlying current that they don't feel like they're getting the whole story. And I think that's kind of based in a pretty good, a good bit of it is based in reality.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes they're not.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with that. And, kind of backing up to the fine aspect of it. And, you said just now, well, they're not going to set the fine for texting while driving at $10,000 because there'd be too much of a backlash. It's the same kind of thing. Let's just take cigarettes, for example. Cigarettes are bad for you. Well, if they're bad for you, why doesn't the government, to protect us from ourselves, just make them illegal? But they don't, right? There'd be a huge backlash if they did something like that.
There'd be a huge backlash. And so, one of the things that they did that, I guess like the Clean Indoor Air Act, which I'm not, and this is done in, 4 or 6 years ago, before I got to the legislature, was to, outlaw smoking in, a multitude of indoor places, specifically restaurants, as I'm going to speak to it. Now, if you're a private business owner and you want to have I enjoy going to a restaurant and not having smoke around me. But I don't begrudge a restaurant if they want it to be a smoking facility. I could still make the decision whether I wanted to, eat there or not.
Yep.
Or if you were working in a restaurant, you could decide whether you want to work there or not. It should still be, that individual business owner's, right to make that decision for themselves without government making it for them. Now, they didn't, just make smoking across the border illegal or tobacco, but they're kind of constricting it in all these different places. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's just like this kind of long way approach of, trying to bring those smoking rates down. Now, here in Arkansas, the number one healthcare cost driver is not tobacco. It's obesity and obesity-related health issues. And that is what's really driving Arkansas's healthcare cost right now. So today it's seatbelts and tobacco. Tomorrow it's going to be mandatory life jackets and a war against donuts. Let's ban trans fat. Let's ban fast food. Let's ban sugar and sweet. These are things that contribute to obesity. Per my understanding, tobacco really doesn't have, an impact on obesity. It's not going to, has no bearing on, on your weight. So, but French fries and donuts and those things do.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of political, what kind of campaign are you going to run saying that if you elect me, we're going to outlaw Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, good luck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing. We're not there right now. But is it out of the picture to think that you couldn't be there in 15, 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
And I want to commend you. So just on this, your point of view here is spot on. We're talking with Senator Scott Flippo. But if you just go to this revenue aspect, back to the seatbelt law, back to the texting while driving law. Number one, you did vote against the increase in that fine, correct?
Correct. Yes,
okay.
I did.
So that's number one. You're really good. That's a really good vote there. But number two, I'm under the belief that this texting law actually makes driving more dangerous because people are going to text anyway. and the government now is going to fine you for it. And so you take that phone and you try to hide it. You put it below the steering wheel. Now your eyes are even more off of the road than they were because people are, and I just feel like, is there nobody in government that wants to acknowledge this, that their law has actually made people, because used to, before texting was outlawed in Arkansas, I would text and drive. But you would do it right up next to the steering wheel with, where your eyes are still on the road. And now that's not happening because the government got involved. Your thoughts on that, Senator Flippo?
Well, and I see your point on there, and I can't really argue it. It's a very good possibility that there's a lot of truth into that, Paul. My opposition to it was really steeped in the fact that we already had a law, a distracted driving law, and there was already a fine in place for texting and driving. And I didn't feel that there was enough. Why weren't we doing a better job of enforcing that law before we went off and increased the fine and did all these other things? Now, this new bill, it had kind of expanded, distracted driving to take it beyond just texting to social media and some other things. But now, if you're in law enforcement and, you pass a motorist on the road and you can still use your GPS and you can still, dial phone numbers. You can make a call when you're driving. Well, how do you know if somebody's dialing a phone number or if they're sending a text and you're passing at 40, 50 miles an hour?
You know what? That's probably the reason why under the old law there was more warnings and less enforcement, because it's so subjective. How in the world are you going to know?
And, now let's not put this beyond the realm of government and even, of Republicans in government to say that, well, now, we should be able to access your phone and see and verify that you indeed were making a call and not doing a text message or not on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to, we want to have access to your phone to verify that.
Yeah.
And can you see that happening, Paul?
Absolutely. Right now we've got the Northwest Arkansas Airport. They're going to put a geofence up so that they can keep Uber drivers out unless they pay them $2 a ride. That's what their new plan is. That was in the news today. And, let's take it a step further. As nanotechnology increases, why not inject yourself with nanobots so the government can monitor your blood alcohol level behind the wheel? I mean, you show people, hey, we can have zero incidents if we'll just strip away all your liberty. And I think that's what this segment is about.
And, and Paul, I think that, look at the, for folks that have had a DUI and you get those blow and go, those devices in your car now, where you have to blow and it can measure and detect, your blood alcohol content. And, if you have any alcohol in your system, your car won't start. And for folks that I know that have had that, they say it's been a great deterrent. Probably even more so than the court costs or the drunk driving courses that they went to. And I think, well, heck, from a government, why don't you just install those and make them mandatory in every vehicle? So even if you've never, if you've never drink and drive or you've never had a DUI, you're still going to have this device on there because we're going to be proactive on that.
It'd be less revenue, though. They wouldn't have those court costs.
Yeah, less revenue, but, a lot more control. And, that's my concern in the government is not just, them taking my money, but is them taking control of my life and my freedom.
Yeah. Senator Scott Flippo, it's always a pleasure.
Even more concerning.
Yes, sir. It's always a pleasure.
Paul. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. We'll do it again soon. Thank you so
very much.
I appreciate you.
Look forward to it.
Yes, sir. Folks, we got to take a break. Senator Scott Flippo, everyone, from District 17. Back in just a moment.